Hello and welcome back to BluzesTech Media. My name is Cher and I'm a photographer and videographer here at BluzesTech Media, and I'm here to teach you how to use Photoshop. In my last video, I went over the spot healing brush tool and how great it is to cover up blemishes and correct skin textures. To a point at least. Today we're going to switch gears and go over how to select and mask in Photoshop and all the cool things you can do with it. So before I get started on that, the first thing that I always do here is I like to make a copy of my background because, like I said in every single video, you may make a mistake and it's good to have that background as a reference and also so that you can see your changes. So I'm going to unlock that background and work off the first layer. Cool. So before we get started, let me just quickly explain to you what selecting and masking is. So first we're going to go over what the quick selection tool is in Photoshop. So the quick selection tool uses a round brush tip and it allows you to define edges in an image. And that's useful if you want to really make an effect or you want to cut something out of a photograph. So here is where it is in Photoshop. Right now it's selected on a magic wand tool because I often use a magic wand tool, so that's why it's popping up first. But if you're new to Photoshop, the first option that you will see is this symbol. And it has a little video to show you what it does, which is basically what we're going to do with this tool. So it makes a selection by finding and following the edges in the image. It really works well with perfect round shapes, or like just perfect shapes, quote unquote. The human face isn't perfect, even as gorgeous as she is. We have a lot of different, twists and turns in our body parts. So quick selecting specific places and specific parts of a human is sometimes more difficult. So we're gonna have to select and mask. Selecting and masking, what that really does is defines that mask and helps you feather and contrast and add specific elements to that mask to make it as close to accurate as possible. In our previous videos, we were doing layer mask, so we were affecting the entire layer. What select and mask does, it helps you select a specific part of a layer and mask that, do the same type of effects that we did in my previous video. But this is just going to be a small part of it. So I just selected on my quick selection tool. If you click on Alt, you can scroll through and see the other options. There's a magic wand tool, which it tries to, or I say tries to, because oftentimes, like I said, it's really not perfect. But when you click on something, it tries to select the entire thing for you. That really works with like I said, perfect shapes or really well edged shapes. You have the object selection tool. It finds and automatically selects an object for you inside of a defined region. So like the example that they're using in this image, if I can get back to it, is a grapefruit. So like I said, it's really a perfect circle, so it kind of can find where that mask would be. Other tools you have is the Lasso tool, freehand selection like a lasso, think about cowboys. It basically helps you can make circles or different shapes for your masks, which is pretty cool. Then you have the Polygon Lasso tool, so it works very much like the pen tool and it makes masks kind of using a pen point type figure layout. Then you have the Magnetic Lasso, which is like a pen tool, but with magnets. It snaps the image edges together. I'm going to show you the different ways you can select things with all of those tools. So right now I'm working with the quick selection tool, which is, like I said, probably the first selection tool you're going to see. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Because we're going to try to select the iris of her eyes. Is that the iris? I'm not really good with body parts. The place that has the color is where we're going to try to select and mask. I'm going to zoom in even a bit more so we can kind of see that. Cool. So now my circle is way too big, so I'm going to make it smaller by clicking on those brackets. When you see a circle with a plus symbol with the selection tool, it means that you're adding to the selection. If you see a subtraction sign, that means you're removing from the selection. So I'm going to kind of show you what that means. So it has an add symbol. So we're going to be adding to the selection. And it's really good to like be mindful of the size of the brush that you're using. I'm going to kind of show you, if you use a big brush, I'm going to Command C this. If you use a big brush and just think, oh, I can just click on that, it's not going to do that. It's actually going to start getting a little crazy and try to select a whole bunch of different things. So as tedious as it is, it's better to just use a smaller brush and kind of just come along the edges. Like I said, it's not going to look perfect your first time trying it, but it's always better to use a smaller brush. Okay, so I'm going to let go from right there. It's good to also take pauses and breaks, because if you try to do the whole thing at once, which I'm going to also show you by Command Z, if you try to do the whole thing at once, it starts to like do that and get crazy. So it's really better to just take it, select something, pull off, and that way also if you make a mistake, you can Command Z and go back to where you were originally, the step before. But if you try to do the whole thing at once, there's no step before. So I like to just kind of take my time. See, now if I go back, it's gonna just be that small thing. Okay, looks like it gets a little bit crazy after that point. Okay, that's fine, because I'm actually gonna show you how to now clean that up. So click on Alt, and that's gonna get you the subtraction symbol, which is going to help you subtract and delete from the mask. So I'm gonna go back, kind of define that circle. And you want to make sure that all of these little small ends here are deleted. You want to make sure that you're only selecting what you want. Cool, so that looks pretty good. I'm liking that. So now I'm going to clean it up a little bit. So select a mask right here. Clicking on that brings up all of these options. And I'm going to explain to you what each of these options are. So even though I just made that selection, we're not really seeing it here. So you have to change your view mode if you want to be able to see that selection that you just made. And there's a few of them. The first one is onion skin, really weird name, but it helps you visualize the selection as an animation style. The onion skin is basically the default. Then we have marching ants, which actually this dotted circle around it that's moving is called marching ants because it's really small and looks like marching ants. So it helps you visualize the selection borders and helps you see the selection that you just made. Then there's overlay, which kind of puts everything in red and only shows you what you selected. Then there's on black, which places the selection over a black background. So kind of does this similar thing to overlay, but now everything is kind of darker and only my selection is really bright and in color. Then there's on white, which does the exact same thing as on black, but just uses a white background. Then there's black and white, which makes your selection white and the entire background that you didn't select black. That way you really get to see what it looks like. And then there's on layers, which surrounds the selection with areas of transparency. That really isn't really helpful right now. My favorite one is usually the marching ants. But if there's something like super distracting, like this is the kind of picture that I would say is a bit distracting. Kind of, you can't really see the edges as well as I would like. I would probably go either black and white or, on black. But I'm going to go with black and white because I feel like here I can kind of see all the selection that I made. And helping me do so kind of showed me that There are some little edges right here that I probably need to go back and look at. Great, so from here, we have the radius. So the radius determines the size of the selection. So using a smaller radius would be helpful for if you want a sharper edge, and a large radius if you want a softer edge. So I want my edge to be a little bit softer, so I'm gonna probably increase it. And doing so, by the way, this is all the way at like 250. You can kind of see how super soft that is. And then this is all the way at 0, which is like much sharper where I started. So I'm gonna make it a little bit softer. Yeah, probably, I like that. Probably leave it at 3. I don't really go heavy on the radius. The smart radius underneath it, if you check that, it's a little bit more consistent with the edges. Clicking on smart radius kind of like gives you like a little booster help. You can choose to use it or not. It really depends on the background and what you're trying to select. Smooth, what it does is reduces those irregular shapes and areas to create a more smoother outline. So I'm going to increase the smoothness. That looks way better. Like, that's what I was going for. But that's great because now I got it at 13. Feathering blurs the transition between the selection and the surrounding pixels. So what that basically means is similar to smoothing, but what it does is kind of create like a blurry look or softness around the edges. So I usually don't go crazy on the feathering. I'm going to show you what it looks like if you do. It gets super blurry to basically non-existent. So I'm just going to really keep it probably not even at 1, like probably just like 0.8. And then your contrast adds contrast to around the edges. I don't really need much contrast, if any. I think probably like that's probably good, probably like 20. It's really good. And then what the shift edge does is it moves soft borders inward with a more negative value or outward with a positive one. So basically what that means is it shifts the borders so that you can remove unwanted colors you might possibly have in the selection edges. For right now, that doesn't really count or is helpful for me because most of the colors around this portrait was fairly the same. So, and that looks really good. It's a really good selection. And time has passed. So like I said, it does take a while, but be patient, you will get there. So now I'm going to click OK because I'm super happy with it. And now that is the selection that I have. Great, so now I have that selection created. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so we can kind of see more of her face and her eye. So let's say for this eye specifically, because we talked about in the past, layer mask is affecting the whole layer. Selecting a mask is selecting a small part of that layer and affecting it. So let's say that I wanted to change the color, right? So we're going to go to hue saturation and change the hue of it. So you see how this change is only affecting that selection I made. It's only affecting the selection to the eye that I made. It's not affecting the entire picture like it did in layer masking. So now we can keep playing around with that. I like that one, that's pretty cool. And you can change the saturation of it. Oh, now she looks like a little vampire. The lightness, all of that stuff. Or darkness. So you just really adjust it to make it look really natural. But really that's how easy it is to change the eye color of something in Photoshop just by selecting and masking it. Just Command Z it. So another thing you can do is maybe if you want to change the brightness of her eye, of that one eye, and the contrast of it. You want to make your eye a little bit more piercing, you can do that. Command Z in that, just so we can keep going back and seeing that selection. Any effect that you can think of that we've gone over, it will only affect that small area that we selected. that's what I love about select and mask, because it just gets so precise. If you want to deselect a mask, you just go to Command D and that takes it away. So that was the quick selection tool. You can select and mask the other mask as well, but I just preference, I just like the quick selection tool. Here's the magic wand tool. If you click on one small area, it tries its best to, I guess that's how I see it, tries its best to, the magic wand tool really is trying to find shapes. It found the shape of this and it perfectly selected it. Now I'm gonna deselect that. The lasso tool, gonna zoom in a bit so that you can see that. Kind of like a cowboy, you just go in there and lasso around. You can see I would not be a good cowboy, and it does that. And then you can go back here, select and mask, and do the entire process again. Gonna deselect that. The other tool here is the Polygon lasso tool. So this one is more like you're building the shape. This would really only work for if you are, I would really only use this if I'm doing smaller objects. If I'm doing a bigger object, I wouldn't do that. There you go. Then we have the magnetic lasso. So that one kind of works like a magnet. So that's how I'm gonna go back. Magnetic lasso tool works on like a magnetic basis. It kind of does the same. It kind of does the same thing like the lasso tool itself. You don't have to click on anything, just follow it along, and it'll create little stops and points for you till you get back to the beginning. Select that one. This is the object selection tool. So if you just highlight across the whole thing, it'll try its best to select it. So you have multiple options for selection. I just like the quick selection tool. I feel like I'm much more confident in that tool than most others. Sometimes I go for the lasso tool because, like we saw, it did a really good job, and especially with these eyelashes and stuff. So that's definitely a tool you can use. But go through all those selection tools and play around with it. Select and mask things. Go crazy. Once you get that mask really settled down, the effects that you can do and the things that you can do within Photoshop grows. Keep practicing those selection and masks, and let me know in the comments what you think, what you learned, and what selection tools you like the most. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching this video, and next time we're gonna jump right back into skin retouching, and I'm gonna show you how to do the burn and dodge method in Photoshop. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on Facebook. Thank you.